Now that we've created this 3D track scene with animated text and graphics, we've got our speed ramp going on, I'm playing it back and realizing it's probably hanging on this shot longer than it needs to. It could speed up even sooner. So how could we do that with this existing speed ramp? Well, I'm basically just gonna go to where I want it to start speeding up, which really, if I play this back, enjoy the view, map marker, probably right about here, and then just set another keyframe by clicking on this button right here. Then I can delete this keyframe because I'm only concerned in preserving the distance between these two keyframes. Grab this one right here, bring it back, and then just like before, go into the graph editor and ease this handle out. So if I play this back, speed ramp in, real time, and then speed ramp out. Honestly, that's even a little slow. Why don't we go to 212? I'll set a keyframe there. Once again, delete this keyframe, grab this one, and ease it out. In fact, I'm even gonna bring this keyframe forward in time and set my work area to match it. I think that timing works a lot better. So that's how we can change the speed ramp. Just be aware that as you bring this in further and further, you're gonna lose your real-time playback after that keyframe. So you might have to disable it by right-clicking, going to time and disabling time remapping, and then re-enable it if you need to get back to the original time code. I don't know, I'm happy with it, so I'll just undo and we'll call that good. But what can we do to make this speed ramp in and out of the shot a little bit more interesting and dynamic, as well as serve as almost like a transition from whatever was before it into this shot, and then again out of this shot into the next one? Well, the first thing that I'm thinking of is basically blowing it out, making it much brighter, like it's overexposed, and then coming into exposure. So why don't we do this with an adjustment layer? I'll just go up to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And the reason I'm doing this is just in case I ever want to apply what I'm about to do to other clips. This way I can just copy and paste the adjustment layer instead of having to copy and paste effects from one thing to the other. So I'll just rename this adjustment layer Transition Effects. And let's start with an effect called Exposure. So I'm just gonna collapse this up so we have some more room here. And I'll search for the exposure effect. And down here in the color correction category, that's the exposure effect. I'll double click that to apply it. And we have three main controls: exposure, offset, and gamma correction. Exposure is probably going to work. As I click and drag this to the right, you see that it just makes everything brighter. I might want to combine that with the offset just to blow out everything to pure white. And that's actually exactly what I want. So I'm going to just make sure that gets up to 100% white and set a keyframe on both the exposure and the offset values. Then I'll go forward just a few frames. It doesn't need to be the same duration as the speed ramp, just maybe 3 or 4 frames, and then click the reset button. And that will reset all of the values, but keep the keyframes. So if I press U on the keyboard, you'll see the 2 keyframes I set, and then when I reset the effect, it added 2 new keyframes. So that's just going to very quickly and linearly animate between those 2 values at the start of the comp. So I'll play that back. You see that it's just very quickly adjusting the exposure. Maybe I'll easy ease into these 2 keyframes and pull them out just a few more frames. And then just go into my graph editor with those keyframes and increase that influence. So it's a little bit snappier into this exposed version of the clip. And that'll serve as a way to get from one clip to the other. But we need to reverse that transition on the way out. So the way I'll do that is by selecting all these keyframes, copying and pasting them, right-clicking on one of the keyframes, going down to Keyframe Assistant and Time Reverse Keyframes. Remember that swaps the 2 keyframes values, and I'll just align the second one with the last frame of my speed ramp. And now it's going to overexpose on the way out. So expose in, animation happens, speed ramp starts, and then it exposes out. And now we've got this kind of loop going on between the start and end of the clip, which would transfer from this clip to another one. What else could we do to make this transition a little more interesting? Well, why don't we try adding in some lens distortion? And there's an effect, if I search for CC Lens, that will do just that. So I'm gonna bring that out onto the adjustment layer, and immediately it's going to look really weird. It's almost like an orb, and that's obviously way too much distortion. But if I come to the effect controls, I could change the size and push this out so it's filling out the edges more. So let's find a spot where it's completely filling out the corners. Go to the start of the animation, and temporarily I'll just disable the exposure so we can actually see it. And then I'm going to set a keyframe not on the size, but the convergence, because this is basically a percentage of distortion, how much this is actually affecting the distortion of the image. And if I go to a negative number, you see that it's reversing the distortion. But let's leave it at 100 to start, set a keyframe there, move forward till the end of the speed ramp, let's say, and then turn the convergence down to 0. So now this is going to animate from super distorted down to no distortion. I'll just press U to bring up the keyframes. That actually collapsed all the keyframes, so I'll press it one more time. And then easy ease this keyframe so that we can see that lens distortion just ease away. And maybe I'll increase the influence in the graph editor just a little bit. There we go, that's nice and smooth. Let's re-enable the exposure effect and see how those two combined create a more complex transition. It's less noticeable now, but it gives a little bit of movement to the outside edges of the frame and feels like a more complicated transition. Let's just repeat what we did with the exposure effect by copying and pasting these keyframes, aligning it with the end of the speed ramp, and time reversing it. So keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. Now it's going to redistort on its way out. So let's play this back as a whole. I like the way that looks. Now, we obviously can stack as many effects as we want. Generally, I like to think that less is more when it comes to these effects, and we're already applying some good amount of lens distortion. But if you wanted to take it another step forward, maybe we would add something like the glow effect, and I'll add that to the adjustment layer. We could really increase the glow radius to make it bloom out, a lot like we did with the background for that full screen title. Maybe turn the threshold down and set a keyframe on the intensity at the start of the adjustment layer. So I'll set glow intensity keyframe, go forward and turn that down to 0. Again, press U 2 times to bring those keyframes back up. Easy ease into that and maybe increase the influence just like before. And that's honestly not doing all that much because of the exposure effect, but maybe we'll turn off the exposure effect and replace that with the glow. So I could really blow this out at the start if I increase the intensity past 1. And now we've got a different look. Now, I don't particularly like this look. I think it's a little bit cheesy, a little too glowy and bloomy. So as far as the design goes, I probably wouldn't do something like this, but I just wanted to show you some options of how you can play around with effects and see how you can be creative with using them as things like transitions. Still, I think I prefer the exposure effect over the glow, so I'm going to delete the glow effect and get back to exposure and keep this a little bit more simple. But that's how we can create some unique and interesting transitions using effects on adjustment layers. Now that we've learned the entire process of 3D camera tracking, I just want to do it one more time to another clip so we can get some repetition in and really get this information to sink in. I want to give you one more tracking example just so we can take a look at how a different type of shot might work. Again, this is an ideal shot for 3D camera tracking. It's a very steady moving aerial shot across a big open field. Not a lot of things are happening in this scene. There are a few people in the grass field down here, but they're not going to throw off the tracking data too much. What I do want to point out is that even though there are all of these trees and not everything is just a flat plane, After Effects is still able to do a pretty decent job at tracking those objects and making sense out of all of those pixels. So what I'd like to do is add another couple of checkpoints, maybe on the path that the contestants have to run along in this competition. And why don't we stick one right on this monument right here, right at the top, we've got some tracking points, and then maybe one further down in this field somewhere. And as I move my mouse around, you can see that highlight popping up. There are tracking points in here, they're just a little hard to see. So I'm gonna turn my track point size up just a little bit. And we can see that there's actually quite a bit of data to track here. I'm just gonna need to be a little selective about where I pull my points from. If I go to this point in time, this would be a great point to grab all of this data from and create a plane out of on the ground here. So maybe I'll just grab some that are a little bit further off in the distance as well on this same plane, and we'll use this as our ground plane and origin of the entire scene. So I'll just right click on that target, go to Set Ground Plane and Origin, and then I'll right click on it one more time and say Create Text and a Camera. And that should appear like it's locked in place. That looks pretty good. All right, let's back up in the scene a little bit and grab some of the points right here. I'll just turn my track point size back down a little bit. And why don't we actually just grab this one point right on the top of this monument? I'll right click on it and say create text. Now that's not going to have much to align that data to, but I can easily rotate that around however I want. So why don't we just go into the text size and scale that up a little bit, maybe pull it off of that monument point, and then rotate it just slightly towards the camera a little bit more. That looks like it's nice and locked in place, and that's a pretty cool flyby as the camera goes past it. Then we've got this text layer right down here, so why don't we rotate that up? I'll grab that X rotation and rotate it forward, maybe pick it up off of the ground a little bit and just rotate it so it doesn't look like it's leaning, maybe even point it towards the camera a little bit. And that also looks really nice as the camera flies by it. Now, why don't we grab that checkpoint marker animation that we had in the last shot and drag that out here and make it a 3D layer by enabling the switch. We'll add the fill effect to that layer and use the same color as the text. And we'll need to scale it up. So it appears very small. This is sometimes a side effect of tracking a very large scene. After Effects will make the scene scale very large, which makes elements we created outside of this scene scale feel very small. So I'm just going to scale that up until it looks nice and big. It doesn't matter that I'm going beyond 100% because I know that this graphic is actually 1080 by 1080, so it could fill this entire frame and not lose any resolution. But it did place that object right in the center of my scene where I set the ground plane and origin. So if I move this back to where this text is now, I'll use that same trick of holding shift while dragging the parent pick whip to that text layer and let go. It's gonna snap and actually reset the scale that I just changed. So we're back down to being at 100% scale. However, that's actually appropriate now that it's in the right location in the scene. So why don't we grab that map marker and we'll have it come in maybe right about here. So I'll just shift the layer over. That's where that will come in. And then we'll have the text animator, that same text animator we were using before, slide and pop in. Double click on that to apply it to both that first text layer and the second text layer, which I do need to change what the text says. Why don't we say checkpoint 2? And we'll use the essential properties to change the value of that map marker. We'll change that to the number 2. And I'm just gonna reorder my layers so that they're in ascending order. And I'll move this one forward so we're not confused, all right? So the first text comes in, checkpoint 2, and then the map marker 2. Maybe we should change this text to say something else. I'll just double click on it and we'll just give it an arbitrary name. Let's just call it Monument Lookout. And that made the text really long, so I'm just gonna scale it down a little bit and then maybe reposition the map marker down a little bit as well. Play that back, we've got Monument Lookout, map marker pops up. That probably took a little too long. Yeah, that's better. And then it's gonna fly past that text and graphic, and then we'll get to about here. That's probably where I want the next text layer to come in. We'll give this one a name. Well, let's just call it Keyframe Planes. And I'll also scale that down. And we'll need another one of these map markers. So let's duplicate that with Controller Command D. Again, use my parent pick whip with the Shift key to transfer it over to where this text layer is. I'll scale it down so it's a little bit better sized and lift it up, as well as go into the essential properties, change that keyframe by double clicking on it and type in 3 instead of 2, and then just realign that timing so that it shows up right after the text. So Keyframe Planes and then the map marker. Cool. And again, this is a very slow shot. I'm probably not going to have a 28-second section of my show that I can just let a drone shot play out like this. So let's take this comp and put it within another comp. So Field Flyover Track is the name of this comp. I'll put that into a new one and drag it out of the pre-comps folder. And I'll rename this one Field Flyover. And in here, I'll do some more time remapping. So right click, time, enable time remapping. I'll move forward to where those first couple of elements come in, so right about there. And that's where I'm gonna set my first keyframe. Play that back in real time and say right about there is where I want it to speed up again. So I'll set another keyframe. Move forward to just before the next text comes in and set a keyframe. Play that back in real time. And say right about there is where it should speed up. So this time we'll have 2 different speed ramps. The first one being up here. So I'll just grab this set of keyframes that I want to keep the distance between and move them forward till about here. So it's going to go much faster, and then real time, and then speed up again. I'll grab these 2 keyframes. Again, I want to maintain the distance between them, but I'll move this forward and it'll speed up. That's probably even slower than it should be. Let's speed that up even more. Very nice. And I'm even going to cut that down to right about there. I'll get rid of this keyframe. And then speed ramp this last section. We'll see how fast that moves. Okay, cool. So again, I'm gonna go to that last keyframe and I'm gonna just take off one frame. Easy way to do that is hold Controller Command and press the down arrow key. That way I don't get that blank space at the end of my comp. I'll set my work area to that point with the N key, and then I'll go into the graph editor and ease out all of these speed ramps. So I'm just gonna grab this handle right here, drag it down. Same thing here, going in the opposite direction, and then ease into it again. And then one more time, ease out of real time into the speed ramp. So let's play that back and see what it looks like. Okay, not bad. I think this middle ramp is a little bit too start and stoppy. I think it really speeds up a little bit too strongly. So I'm gonna just pull the influence handles out a little bit so we get more of this shape, not such a pointy speed ramp in the middle here. I'd also like for the speed ramp to end right when the text comes in. So I'm gonna go forward a few more frames, add another keyframe and delete this one in between, and then make sure that I grab all of these so I can tighten it up just a little bit more without affecting the real-time section right here. Then I'll grab this handle, just ease it out. Again, not being too strong like that, just a little bump to get that transition from the first point to the second point. And that looks like this. And you know what? I think I could do the same thing on the other end. It hangs on this for a while. I'm gonna set a keyframe right here, delete this one, grab all of these keyframes and bring them back. And I'll hold shift to make sure I don't lift this keyframe up like this. Ease in and out of that. And then on the end, I also think it's hanging on that longer than it needs to. So let's play this back. Yeah, probably right about here is where it speed ramps back up. Get rid of this keyframe. Bring this in a little tighter and ease out of it. And let's look at that as a whole. Yeah, I think that works pretty well. Now what we could do is just add in the same transitional element that we had in our other shot. So I'll go to the checkpoint 1 comp. I'll grab that transition effects adjustment layer and copy it, and then paste it into this comp, the field flyover. Paste right on top. Bring up the keyframes so I can align them properly, but the first set is already working. I just need to retime this second set of keyframes for the out transition. I'll align that with the end, and now it will transition in and transition out. Now I could export either one of these comps on their own and bring them into whatever editor I'm using, but just to get a sense of how these transitions are working together, I'm gonna trim my comp to the work area just by right-clicking on the work area and saying trim comp to work area. And then I'm going to bring both of these pre-comps into a new comp. So I'll select both of them, drag them to the new comp button, make sure that I'm creating a single composition, and click the sequence layers button. Now when I click OK, that's going to put them end to end. I've got the first checkpoint animation with the transition in, and actually it looks like I didn't trim this one down in this main comp. So I'm gonna double click into there, right click on the work area and say trim comp to work area. And now back in this new comp that I created, that will be trimmed. I'll just drag this one back while holding shift, and we'll be able to now see the transition go from one clip to the next. Very seamless and smooth. I think that's working out great. That's 3D camera tracking in After Effects. It's really not that complicated of a process, and for what it enables you to do, it really takes no time at all. So I hope that you now have a good grasp on how you can use this feature in your own projects moving forward. Don't forget to download the assignment PDF so you can try this out for yourself.